Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron,
Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Among the animals, whatever divides the hoof, having cloven hooves and chewing the cud, that you may eat. Nevertheless,
All right, for example, like you can't eat a horse because they don't have split hooves, right? So let's look at like a horse hoof, for example, right? There's no split. But then like look at a goat hoof. See, it's split. We can eat that. We cannot eat that. You see?
these you shall
meaning.
not eat among those that chew the cud, or those that have cloven hooves. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The rock hyrax, because it chews the cud but does not have...
The what? Rock hyrax? What is that? Rock hyrax. Aw, I wouldn't want to eat that. Rock hyrax, also called a dassie, Cape hyrax, rock rabbit, and coney, is a medium-sized terrestrial mammal native to Africa and the Middle East. Ah.
have cloven hooves, is unclean to you. The hare, because it chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves, is unclean to you.
Okay, so we can't eat rabbit. Rabbit is unclean. Because it chews cud but does not have cloven hooves. Wait, no, that can't be talking about a rabbit, can it? There's no hooves involved. Well, with the rock hyrax, there's no hooves involved either, right? There's little feet. Yeah. So maybe so. Okay, so because it's in the chewing cud category. So if it chews cud, it has to have cloven hooves.
And the swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hooves, yet does not chew the cud, is unclean to you.
I wonder why. Why is that combination? Why that combination? We can look it up. Crazy, not crazy, but the worrisome thing right now is that I don't. That's a cute picture. I didn't get my camera charged, so yeah, we're in dangerous territory. Let's see. Why chew cud and cloven hooves? The inner meaning of the split hooves and chewing of the cud. In Parshat Shemini, it speaks of the law of kosher animals. We read that there are two signs that... Okay, we know that. Okay, but this is interesting. We read that there are two signs that tell us that land animals are kosher. Cloven hooves, or in the common vernacular, split hooves. And that is a ruminant. An animal that chews its cud. Okay, a ruminant is an animal that chews its cud. Okay, interesting. The common domesticated animals that we eat are cattle, sheep, and goats. However, unbeknownst to many, many animals in the wild are kosher, including all kinds of deer, antelope, moose, buffalo, bison, wildebeest, giraffe, and more. Wow, we need giraffe. All of them are herbivores. None of them are animals of prey. Interesting. I mean, chickens are animals of prey. They eat worms and stuff. These animals don't have upper teeth, and they chew their food in a side-to-side motion. Why did God forbid other animals? One explanation given by Ramban is that what one eats becomes part and parcel with their entire being, affecting not only their flesh and blood, but their entire personality, even their personality. Okay. Yeah, isn't that like something like Ayurveda deals with this type of thing too? Okay, since these animals have negative traits, God did not want to not want us to eat them. They had negative traits, lest we take on those negative traits. From this is understood that God. What am I reading? From this is understood that good traits are somehow connected to split hooves and chewing the cud. God wants us to have these good traits, which means that in some way we should also have split hooves and chew our cud. That's some symbolism going on there. Hopefully they'll explain it. There's a discussion regarding kosher animals. Are these animals intrinsically kosher and the kosher signs just help us identify them? Or are they only kosher because of the qualities they possess? It seems from the verse, because it chews its cud, that the kosher sign is what causes the animal to be kosher. I don't think that's necessarily the case. It could just be that every single animal that's kosher chews its cud, and therefore you can use it as a pretty solid sign that it's kosher. Not that chewing cud causes the kosherness, right? It's not necessarily the case, in my opinion. Are you a kosher animal? I don't think so. But even if this were not the case, the fact that God gave us these signs to differentiate between kosher and non-kosher animals means that we can learn from them whether our internal animal is. I don't really care about that. I want to know, because I'm not eating humans anytime. If you guys want to check that out, go ahead. All right. Animals like humans have their heads and heart separated from the ground. It is only their legs that touch the ground. Okay. And even they are separated from the ground by hooves. Okay. This means that we should not have our higher faculties, namely our heads and hearts, our thoughts and emotions invested in earthly pursuits. We should use only our lower faculties of action, our arms and legs, to serve us in our earthly pursuits. Even they should have a separation, a hoof, meaning only as much as necessary. Okay, I like that idea. But is that really the reason why we are not to eat? The hooves must be split, meaning that even in our earthly pursuits, God should not be able to come through and permeate them, making the physical godly. Okay, yeah, is this all just symbolic or no? The law that the hooves have to be split through and through. When a kosher animal walks, each step connects to the ground with both the right and left side of the hoof. When we deal with earthly matters, we should always have the balance of drawing good closer with the right and pushing bad away with the left. There has to be a constant effort to keep the straight path, not to veer right or left. Okay. Yeah. All right, let's see what someone else thinks. Because I don't know if it's just symbolic, right? Eat only animals that... Why? But what? Huh? Find out how to calculate value for used cars. That's the ad, and I don't want to click on it. What do I refresh? Stop it. But what exactly are we to learn? What Israel should eat to be separated from the nations around them? What Israel was to eat to be healthy? What we should eat if we want to please God? Okay, I get this question, right? God told you to do something, so you're doing it, right? And probably like don't eat shellfish and all that stuff, right? They're bottom feeders. They don't eat the healthiest of food, so don't eat that, right? Pigs are really dirty. They eat their own waste, so don't eat that. So okay, that makes sense. That question. What Israel should eat to be separated from the nations around them, right? They wanted a division between the idol worshippers, the pagans, right? Their customs, they wanted to be different, right? To stand apart. So I get that. And all right. So these questions are good questions. What's a hermeneutic? We need the right hermeneutic to understand these obscure passages of the Bible. A hermeneutic is simply a method for interpreting the Bible. The following is just one example. Others will emphasize different points, but this one is representative of a hermeneutic that many Christian universities, professors, pastors, and teachers espouse. Jesus is the hermeneutic. The reason... Okay, what are we getting into here? What you eat does not make you clean or unclean. That's not what the Bible says. The emphasis of the dietary laws in Deuteronomy and Leviticus is that you had to eat certain animals to be clean. I mean, you could starve to death and be clean also, so you don't have to eat them to be clean. Conversely, if you were to eat other animals that were forbidden, then you would be unclean. But Jesus tells us directly what we eat does not make us clean or unclean. Okay, here we go. We read this in Mark, right? But the context is different. The context was not talking about this exactly, right? It was Jesus was talking on it to a deeper level. And before that, we were talking about the priests. I mean, the Pharisees, right? They were talking about how, don't eat your bread with dirty hands, right? Because you're gonna get actually dirt on your bread. You're gonna put it in your mouth, and you're gonna defile your body because you're eating dirt, right? And Jesus is like, whatever you put in your mouth is not gonna defile you. It's how you behave, how you act, what you say, that can defile you, right? Yeah. So this is going off topic here. And we're gonna get to this when we get to Matthew. If you guys want to check that out, I'm gonna keep that in the description also. One more. All right, so the animal must bring up its cud and chew it. That means that after swallowing, we already know it, that chewing cud it is and everything. Okay. Why do these particular characteristics cause an animal to become kosher? The power of food. The Kabbalah teaches... what's the Kabbalah? I've heard that. The Kabbalah teaches that the physical attributes of an animal reflect distinct psychological and spiritual qualities of its soul. Another point expounded by the Jewish sages is that the food a person consumes has a profound effect on one's psyche. Therefore, when a person eats the flesh of a particular animal, the personality of this animal affects the identity of the human consumer. Split hooves and chewing the cud represent two qualities of the soul of these animals that are crucially necessary for the healthy development of the Jewish character. When the Jews consume substance of these animals, he becomes a more kosher and refined human being. But they weren't even allowed to touch an unclean animal. So why is it so unclean? And why do these things make these animals, the split hooves and the split hooves and what was the other thing? the split hooves and the chewing of the cud. Cloven hooves, the division existing in the covering of an animal's feet, on an animal's feet, are symbolic. Okay. We read that in somewhere else, in the other article. Okay. Okay, so is it all symbolic? But I mean, here it's talking about how like the food can actually affect your personality. That's kind of crazy. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let's keep going.
Their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the water.
Okay, so camera's dead. Let me connect my GoPro. I don't even know how long ago it died. I need to get a charger for my camera, man. Like a charger I can plug in while I'm recording, so I don't have to deal with this battery. All right, where is the? Come on now, GoPro did too. I mean, we can keep it playing, right? Don't have to waste time. You can keep it playing. Listen to this. You don't have to see my face while I get the GoPro ready.
Touch. They are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the water. Whatever in the water has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, that you may eat. But all in the seas or in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, all that move in the water, or any living thing which is in the water, they are an abomination to you. They shall be an abomination to you. You shall not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. Whatever in the water does not have fins or scales, that shall be an abomination to you. And these you shall regard as an abomination among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, the buzzard, the kite, and the falcon after its kind. Every raven after its kind. The ostrich, the short-eared owl, the seagull, and the hawk after its kind. The little owl, the fisher owl, and the screech owl. The white owl, the jackdaw, and the carrion vulture. The stork, the heron after its kind, the hoopoe, and the bat.
The hoopoe.
All flying insects that creep on all fours shall be an abomination to you. Yet these you may eat of every flying insect that creeps on all fours. Those which have jointed legs above their feet with which to leap on the earth, these you may eat. The locust after its kind, the destroying locust after its kind, the cricket after its kind, and the grasshopper after its kind. But all other flying insects which have 4 feet shall be an abomination to you. By these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries part of the carcass of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. The carcass of any animal which divides the foot but is not cloven-hoofed or does not chew the cud is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean. And whatever goes on its paws among all kinds of animals that go on all fours, those are unclean to you. Whoever touches any such carcass shall be unclean until evening. Whoever carries any such carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. It is unclean to you. These also shall be unclean to you among the creeping things that creep on the earth: the mole, the mouse, and the large lizard after its kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand reptile, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is in which any work is done, it must be put in water. And it shall be unclean until evening. Then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls you shall break, and whatever is in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that may be drunk from it becomes unclean. And everything on which a part of any such carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether it is an oven or cooking stove, it shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern in which there is plenty of water shall be clean, but whatever touches any such carcass becomes unclean. And if a part of any such carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it remains clean. But if water is put on the seed, and if a part of any such carcass falls on it, it becomes unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. He who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. He also who carries its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening.
Okay, just unclean.
And every creeping thing that creeps on the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatever crawls on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet among all creeping things that creep on the earth, these you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creeps, nor shall you make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore consecrate yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any creeping thing that creeps on the earth. For I am the Lord who brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the animals and the birds and every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that creeps on the earth, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten.
Do you think they ate some unclean animals up until this point?
For
where's that?
Falls on it.
I want to see what that animal was. The jackdaw. What's a jackdaw? A jackdaw. Oh, it's a okay. That sounded like a jackdaw. Sounded like some type of monster hunter creature, to be honest. A hoopoe. That's what I wanted to look up. Oh, that's a cool looking bird. Yeah, I don't want to eat that. I did not want to eat that. That thing looks cool. Look at that thing. I mean, there's not much meat on it, too. Why would you want to eat it, even? Right? That's cool. It's cool that these animals were alive all the way back then, you know?
Until.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses.
Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman has conceived and borne a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day,
Okay. If she gave birth to a male child, she's unclean? Why? And that means if she's unclean, so you can't even touch her, right? Because then you become unclean.
the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall then continue in the blood of her purification 33 days. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days.
Dang, why? So she's unclean for twice as long if she gave birth to a female versus a male. Why? Okay, let's see what this Bible has got to say about that. 2. Yeah. The child did not cause the... Let me get in over here. Man, I gotta lift this Bible up. I gotta lower the mic. Alright, there we go. The child did not cause the mother to be unclean. God had ordained the blessed child. God had ordained and blessed childbirth from the beginning, even before the sin in the garden. Wait, really? What? Really? Let's see. Let me go back. Because I don't remember that. Genesis 1:28, it said, Then God blessed them and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish. Okay, yeah. Boom, right there, straight up, right there. He told Adam and Eve, Be fruitful and multiply. He blessed childbirth. Okay. So where are we? 2, right? Okay, here. The child did not cause the mother to be unclean. God had ordained and blessed childbirth from the beginning, even before the sin in the garden. Rather, it was the blood and other fluids in childbirth that made the mother ritually unclean for a period of time, just as other bodily fluids cause people to be unclean. This uncleanliness was not necessarily a moral judgment on the mother. 7 days of uncleanliness for a male child was the same length of time as the uncleanliness for the women's menstrual period or customary impurity. Recent medical science has concluded that the 8th day is the best time for circumcision. Before the 8th day, blood does not clot as well, and after it, sensitivity. Okay, what did it say about the 8th day? 12:3. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Oh, okay. So that's backed by science, looks like. Before the 8th day, blood does not clot as well, and after it, sensitivity to pain becomes greater. Circumcision was also practiced by groups such as the Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites. However, in Israel, it was the outward symbol of God's covenant with Abraham. The fact that the symbol involved the male reproductive organ was a reminder that God had promised Abraham many descendants. The 8th day also marked the end of the mother's uncleanliness with regard to everyday objects and activities. She no longer would make them unclean by touching them. But her personal uncleanliness would continue for another 33 days. This corresponds with the medical characteristics of childbirth. How? After 7 days, Most discharges have ceased, but slight signs may continue for as long as 6 weeks. Okay. I don't know what I'm thinking. If 33 days is sticking to me because I'm thinking of Jesus dying at 33 years. I'm curious if there's like a tie there, like some symbolic tie. The phrase blood of her purification reminds us of this. Blood is the carrier of life in the body and the agent of purification from sin, both in the Old Testament sacrificial system and Christ's sacrifice. At the same time, blood may become a source of pollution and death if it is taken lightly or not handled appropriately. The birth of a female child doubled the period of ritual impurity. No reason is given. Okay, I guess we could have just skipped to that, right? No reason is given, but they guessed all the way through 12:3, 12:4. Why not 4:5? Yeah, is there any symbolism, right? The woman will be unclean for 33 days. Is there anything? They're unclean for 33 days. After that, they can touch. After the 33 years, they can touch things. But that's with the woman. See, I was thinking Jesus died and he didn't let, Mary Magdalene touch him after he was resurrected. But I don't know. There's probably nothing. There's nothing there.
When the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or a daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who was born a male or a female. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a burnt offering and the other as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she will be clean.
"13. And
the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron.
When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and indeed if the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day. And indeed, if the sore has faded, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean.
Man, imagine some guy just like a little kid just falling down, got hurt, The cut heals. He just had a scab, and then he had to be isolated for like 14
The
days.
scab should at all spread over the skin after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest. And the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the swelling on the skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider. And indeed, if the leprosy has covered...
Say that again? And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all of the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider. Consider what? The guy has leprosy.
But all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has all turned white. He is clean.
Wait, what? And if leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. What? Okay, so if you have leprosy and then you have this... I am confused. So if it's white, it's okay. But I just thought we just... The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body. And if the sore has hair on... If the hair on the sore turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is the leprous sore. But if a bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore for 7 days. Okay. And then...
Poor wolf. Leprosy breaking.
Wait, we're not here yet, right?
Skin.
Where were we, man? I don't remember the yellow hair.
Broken out in the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce...
Okay, here. Yeah. Yeah, it is a leper sore, but if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, and okay, we know it didn't. We passed this.
And the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn broken out of him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean. Skin cleansing.
What is going on, man? What is going on?
Turns white again, he shall come to the priest.
Where were we, man? Where were we?
And indeed, if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin. He is clean after his cleansing.
Yeah, we didn't get that to here.
and it is not deep.
Man, I don't even what the cat is going on.
Shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider. And indeed, if the leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has all turned white. He is clean. But when
so the sore, if they're not open sores and they all just turn white, you're cool. Yeah, it's fine now. Okay.
when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean. For the raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. Or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the sore has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. He is clean. If the body develops a boil in the skin, and it is healed, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling, or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest. And if, when the priest sees it, it indeed appears deeper than the skin, and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore which has broken out of the boil. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in it, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And if it should at all spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall examine it. And indeed, if the hair of the bright spot has turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out in the burn. Therefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean.
I mean, burns can get really deep though, right? So, I mean, that's below the skin. But I guess, I don't know if that changes the hair color. That could damage the follicles and you would never grow hair there again. But I don't know how that works.
It is a leprous sore. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. If it has at all spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the bright spot stays in one place, and has not spread on the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn. The priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar from the burn. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or the beard, then the priest shall examine the sore. And indeed, if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is in it thin yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scaly leprosy of the head or beard. But if the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine the sore. And indeed, if the scale has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, and the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not shave. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale another 7 days.
Okay.
On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scale. And indeed, if the scale has not spread over the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scale should at all spread over the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest need not seek for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the scale appears to be at a standstill, and there is black hair grown up in it, the scale has healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean.
What if it just malnourished?
If a man or a woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, specifically white bright spots, then the priest shall look. And indeed, if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin. He is clean. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. And if there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish white sore, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine it.
How does leprosy start?
And indeed, if the swelling of the sore is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, as the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His sore is on his head. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean. All the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Also,
Man, I've seen like a lot of Bible movies where leper, they're unclean. They keep saying, and for themselves, right, just to warn other people that they're unclean. And like now knowing how deeply important the word unclean is and clean is to them, like that hurts. Like that's sad. Having to call yourself unclean and warn the people around you that you're unclean. Like that's sad.
Also, if a garment has a leprous plague in it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it is in the warp or woof of linen or wool, whether in leather or in anything made of leather, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, it is a leprous plague, and shall be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the plague, and isolate that which has the plague 7 days. And he shall examine the plague on the 7th day. If the plague has spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, in the leather or in anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy. It is unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment in which is the plague, whether warp or woof, in wool or in linen, or anything of leather, for it is an active leprosy. The garment shall be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the plague. And he shall isolate it another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed. And indeed, if the plague has not changed its color, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away, whether the damage is outside or inside. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded after washing it, then he shall tear it out of the garment, whether out of the warp or out of the woof or out of the leather. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything made of leather, it is a spreading plague. You shall burn with fire that in which is the plague. And if you
I gotta
wash
look
the
up what
garment,
warp and woof
either
means
warp or
after
woof
this.
or whatever is made of leather, if the plague has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a second time and shall be clean. This is the law of the leprous plague in a garment of wool or linen, either in the warp or woof, or in anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean.
All right, that's it for that. Warp and woof. The underlying basis, foundation. The underlying structure of something on which something is built, a base or foundation. The threads is what we're looking for. The threads in a woven fabric comprised of the warp, the threads running lengthwise, and the woof, threads running crosswise, to create the texture of the fabric. I could see a video game called Warp and Woof. The Warp and the Woof. Or Warp and the Woof. Something like that. I could see a video game with that name. I don't know what it would be about. Maybe a space dog and his seamstress friend. I don't know. But I could see that being a game. But that's it for Leviticus 11, 12, and 13. Right? We talked about multiple things. Unclean foods. Unclean women after childbirth. All that stuff. And the laws concerning leprosy. So tomorrow we're going to be going into 14. The ritual for cleansing healed lepers. I want to know, how did lepers get healed? I guess we'll find that out. So stay tuned for tomorrow's reading. We'll jump into Leviticus 14. I apologize for not being here for a few days. Again, I was sick. And before that, I was out of town filming for The Chosen. So I think I'm gonna try and make a video on that. So look out for that. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day. And yeah, check back tomorrow for Leviticus chapter 14. And I'll see you guys then. Take care.